This film is divisive. Love it or hate it, you can't deny it's a wholly original film, and its dry, emotionally detached portrayal of human behavior is distinct.
I was looking for you.
I was masturbating behind those trees over there.
The film has been interpreted in a lot of different ways that seem to often disregard the intentions of the writers and the director, which I find irritating since I think their perspective gives you a much clearer context for the film. So today we're going to analyze The Lobster on the basis of the intentions of the writers Yorgos Lanthimos and Efthimis Filippou. Okay, in short, as a reminder, here's the IMDb synopsis. In a dystopian near future, according to the laws of the city, single people are taken to the hotel, where they're obliged to find a romantic partner in 45 days or they're transformed into an animal of their choosing and sent off into the woods. By the way, I'm obviously going to be discussing a lot of the film here, so if you haven't watched it,
get the fuck out of here.
Labeling this film as a dystopian sci-fi film seems like a product of film marketing to me. I think it's better described as an absurdist dark comedy about human romantic behavior.
Yeah.
Since this better reflects the writer's style and the intentions of the story.
Okay, let's elaborate.
So let's start with the technique of exaggeration into absurdity. In an interview with Daphne Passa, Filippou mentions the importance of absurdity in his work. He says, "I make something very unrealistic in order to show something very realistic. I'll speak in an absurd way about something logical. I always remind myself that what I'm saying exists, so I never lose sense of what I'm doing." It seems counterintuitive to capture reality by abandoning realism.
That would be absurd.
But in the case of human nature, I think it's actually perfect. Since, let's face it, if you exercise any kind of objectivity in your observation, most of the shit we do is completely absurd.
Oh, that naughty old elf must be one mean bastard to give us this so early.
There are fundamental realities of human nature embedded in these seemingly ridiculous, absurd scenes and moments. It's sometimes presented in such a staged, direct manner that it's funny, but at the same time depicts horrifying aspects of human nature that we know to be true. This absurdist approach also inherently creates really unique scenes and moments that I really enjoy.
What happened?
She jumped from the window of room 180. There's blood and biscuits everywhere.
I hope she dies right away.
Nothing is worse than a film that doesn't take risks. That risk may be shocking you, boring you, or confusing you, but if the film plays it safe all the way through, as far as I'm concerned, it can't qualify as a good film. And this film takes some risks. Now, to be honest, the structure, pacing, and dry style of the film can make it drag in parts, but the interspersed bizarre scenes and humor hold the film together. Here's one of my favorite scenes.
This is our new daughter. Her name's Elizabeth. Elizabeth, give the nice man a kiss. He's a friend of mine. The last thing I want right now is a kiss from a silly little girl.
It's also funny that a world that's so obsessed with social rules so often has characters completely disregard basic social etiquette. It's worth emphasizing that the use of absurdity is a technique and not a consequence of events or conditions within the film. Because some interviewer asked whether the infantilization of the characters was a result of the world's authoritarian system, which Lanthimos did not agree with. Speaking of which, in the film you have this representation of enforced monogamy. The societal pressure of finding a partner is actually enforced through an intervention by an authoritarian establishment, the hotel. It'd be very easy to interpret the film politically as a detraction of strict political ideologies, since both the establishment, the hotel, and the rebellion, the people in the woods, enforce rules that harm the people involved in them for acting freely and following their nature. Since I didn't find any material where Lanthimos or Filippou implied or stated a political intention, I think it's more of a conceptual device to exaggerate the romantic human behaviors that are being explored in the film. So I'm gonna pass on the political interpretations, but don't lose your fucking marbles over it.
This is a crucifixion. This is political.
Let's go through what Lanthimos said, since there's more material of that and he also directed the film. This is taken from when Lanthimos was interviewed by Fabien Lemassier about the film. I don't mean to express any particular message. I don't mean to say that human beings are this way or that way. I want to explore certain aspects, but I'm not making fun. I'm trying to take advantage of the theme of the film. How do people see solitude? The movie is aimed at triggering questions rather than providing answers. So obviously the film lays the information out and is open to interpretation, but there's still a theme and a core focus. This gives us a clearer way of accessing the film. Lanthimos also mentions that the writing of the film came from an accumulation of lifelong observations of romantic behavior.
I like to watch.
So what insights can we glean from the film with this in mind? Well, when we consider the theme of how people see solitude in the context of romantic human relationships, you probably think of singleness. And this is in fact something a lot of people have observed in the film and further extrapolated the parallels with our society. How singleness is stigmatized, the pressure to pair up, etc. It's an integral and very clearly displayed aspect of the film. But in exploring these concepts in this highly exaggerated and sterilized environment, some really interesting moments present themselves. For example, the time pressure introduced by the hotel leads to a number of interesting consequences. Pairing with a partner within a given window of time seems like a parallel to the biological time pressure with regard to reproduction and fertility.
My biological clock is ticking like this.
People pair up by a certain age to reproduce, and if you haven't found someone, it's gonna become increasingly difficult. I mean, this is the case in dating in general. There's less beating around the bush the older you get in dating.
We gotta stop pussy dicking around here, okay?
In the film, you see this time pressure induce desperation in some of the characters. One character reduces herself to sexual acts she's willing to perform in order to entice the protagonist, presumably to pair with her. Just another reminder of the thin veil of civilization that separates us from the natural world. In the case of this film, that veil is materialized in the form of the transformation room. Another character resorts to faking a shared characteristic in order to pair with another girl, which the protagonist then also attempts with less than desirable consequences.
I killed your brother. I left him to die very slowly.
Basically, she tests whether he's actually as emotionless as she is by violently murdering his brother, who had been transformed into a dog.
What the fuck?
Yeah, it's a bit fucked up, but it's a really strong scene, and the details in how the editing unfolds to reveal bits of information is perfect, and Colin Farrell's performance when he has to pretend this doesn't affect him emotionally is top class.
Would you like some coffee?
I'd love some.
But this drive to be paired and not be banished to the wilderness as an animal is so strong that he still tries to suppress his feelings of pain after seeing his murdered brother in order to be paired with the fucking murderer.
What is going on?
If this isn't a metaphor for the suffering that people go through in relationships in order to simply not be alone, I don't know what is. One last thing that I definitely got reminded of when rewatching this film was that humans love all the different flavors of rules.
It's delicious.
So the establishment has rules you can't break without facing consequences. The rebels also have rules that you can't break without facing consequences. But even the main characters, when they try to break away from the rebellion, are still following one of the rules all the way back from the establishment. Namely, having a defining characteristic that you share with your partner, which makes the protagonist feel that he needs to blind himself so that he and his lover can share that as a defining characteristic, even though they could just make up a shared characteristic to fit into the society in the film and just love one another how they are. But regardless, even if it's just coincidental, I think this is a massively underappreciated portrayal of how deeply ingrained ideologies and our conceptualizations of the world can become, even when you're actively subverting and resisting them. Yeah, unfortunately, no one's infallible, and you're probably following ideas and performing behaviors that you actually disagree with without even noticing it.
Terrifying, isn't it?
It is kind of funny though how arbitrary you might find the fact that they need to have a common defining characteristic when finding partners in the film. You know, what difference does it make whether you both have nosebleeds or short-sightedness? It's not an indication of any kind of compatibility. If anything, it would be better to have the opposite characteristics so you can balance each other out. But I think this kind of reflects the coincidental or arbitrary nature of finding a partner you connect with in real life. Sometimes it kicks off because you have similar interests. Sometimes it's just because you were at the same place at the same time. It's really not that different, except for the fact that it's not forced onto you by the state.
The single most important detail.
Okay, maybe it's a bit different. Overall, this film seems like the weirdest way to process the fear of loneliness and the complexity of relationships and human behavior. But a lot of the most interesting observations regarding these topics can be found in the details of how the film is crafted, which I love. This film is off the wall, and it's also the first Lanthimos film I watched. If you like it, I'd also recommend Dogtooth, which was one of his earlier films, and The Killing of a Sacred Deer, which came after The Lobster. I wasn't crazy about Alps, and after watching The Favourite, I sort of assumed his voice has now been diluted by commercialism, but I still need to watch his newer work, so I won't judge too harshly yet. Anyway, thanks for listening, and see you soon.